So, I think that what David DuByne has to share with us is going to be absolutely seminal to everything that's unfolding, and you're going to see how this is very much part of the thread that I've been talking about that runs through the whole event with all of the speakers. So, ladies and gentlemen, David DuByne.
We have the sun, and today when I talk, I want you to think about how the sun is connected to all the events you've seen in history, about the wars that have started, the economy. Things that seem random are mainly based around food production. During low solar activities, we produce less food, or we can grow less food globally. And now we're pushing agriculture even higher into the latitudes. The sun is responsible for so many things in our societies. When our bellies are full, we have time for art and creativity, engineering, music. We have time, instead of thinking about where's my next meal going to come from. But you notice routinely that during the dark ages that we've seen, it's revolving around people being sick and not having enough food. But what caused that? So a lot of the things that you're seeing today in the world about political posturing, saber rattling, trade deals, apparently reckless government, which we see everywhere in every country, as if they're never going to have to pay it back. Well, what if I was going to show you through this that they're not going to? No, they never plan to. Everything that's been talked about so far kind of dovetails into this if you understand the basic premise of there's not going to be enough food to feed everybody in the future, but this is not about a doom and gloom presentation. This is about the greatest opportunity in human history in front of you, if you can see where the opportunity lies, what niche, what services, what products. How can you help people live the best lives during the transition phase, or during these ultimate times of change, if you will. So that's what predictive programming. So this winter is coming. We hear about this all the time on different shows. It's the most popular show right now, Game of Thrones. But why is that? I'm going to start my timer here. So, I have my own time. We see this, winter's coming, winter, and everywhere you look, things are cold. There's always this predictive programming around. Why are they telling you this? So I'm going to take you through a history lesson in pictures today. I don't want it to be just look at the slides. I want to tell a picture or a story with the pictures. And we're going to start off here. We're going to go through history, because you have to understand the history and the cycles before you can understand a little bit into the future. I'll give you some timelines about 10 years out. Now, what you're looking at here, and the first question I would even ask you is, if your food prices double, what would you quit spending on first? GMO. I meant movies or something like that. Yeah, GMO, yeah, you'd buy healthier foods. You'd buy bulk foods, healthier foods, and you would shift your spending habits slightly. Now, what if your food prices tripled? Now, for us in here, we have the means to sit here and pay a little extra money in an incredible venue. Thank you, Ian, for arranging this. Incredible spot. We have the means for that. But what about the bottom 10, 15% of our society that's living hand-to-mouth with government assistance, and their food prices double or triple? How would that upset the societal balance if they're protesting on the streets and going into food markets, and theft will increase for sure. So I'm going to take us through the historical past, and then I'm going to paint you a picture of what we can expect in the future. So what we're looking at here, this is 1755, and then it comes up to 1800. So we're looking here at a timeline about that. And this is the old, what they call the Czech lands, or Czechoslovakia, and now it's the Czech Republic, and then also in Switzerland here. So what they did is they took a look at the price of wheat and the price of rye during these times. Now, this is the most critical thing to understand. The price spikes were 20, and then they jumped to 80, so a 4x on the food price. But then you'll notice that it decreased after some bad harvest years, and it stabilized. But then it spiked again, and then it came down to some stable years for about 5 years here, 10 years, and then it spiked again, and then it's back down again. So when people talk to you about grand solar minimum, A, they always seem to throw in this strange lexicon of ice age, where they try to convince you that there's going to be 2 miles of ice over something, and they derail the argument or the conversation right then by saying, oh, there's ice everywhere. It's not like that. It is going to get cooler in different latitudes, which is going to affect the actual amount of food production, but understand this, it's not going to be cold and incredible food prices forever. You can see clearly, even in the most affected regions of Europe during the mini ice age or the Maunder minimum, ice fairs on the Thames River, that the food prices still were up and down. And we take a look here. This includes most of Europe. They went through a lot of the different capital cities during the times. Now, this particular slide here goes from 1690 all the way up to 1702, and it's just measuring the price of rye and how much it cost. But it took into account Amsterdam, Paris, Brussels. So we can see the same thing that happened again. There were terrible years for harvest where prices spiked. But look at that price spike. That's a 7x increase. Now, what do you think would happen to our modern economy if your food prices increased 7x? Yeah, it would be greatly shift everything. The spending patterns, the entire economy and all the money you had would shift in just agriculture, and everything else would die on the vine outside that. Governments know this. They understand the cycles. So how would you, if you were the leader of the world, I'll put you there for a few seconds, how would you try to avoid mass panic? And how would you try to get yourself ready with continuity of government without allowing everybody else to compete for the same resources that are available freely right now in the supply chain? So these are the two things you need to think about. But then we see the same thing. They had a couple really good years for harvest, and prices stabilized again. They came right back down, and then oops, bad harvest, and then they're back up again. So we can see this undulation up and down, but I think the first wave would take out most economies right now in the fiat system. So I thought to myself, let me show you what the Maunder minimum is, because we're here. You understand the Thames froze over during the Maunder minimum. This is like central with the most information in the UK that there ever has been cataloged about this event and different parts of Europe. So we can see the solar activity dipped off into almost nothing, and this is where the agriculture dropped out in terms of Asia, Europe. You can find some places in America. When they landed over in Jonestown, they landed in the middle of the depths of this Maunder minimum when they got in there, and the food production in the United States from, say, 1600 to 1650, right in the depths of this, they nearly starved to death when they landed over there. They came in the wrong time of the leanest food production available, even through nature. All the trees and plants, they went into hibernation and conservation mode. So it's a global phenomenon. It happens everywhere. So I wanted to try to explain what it is first, and how you can see into the future and maybe get some plan for yourself together. Now, I thought to myself, is there a moderate example of food price spikes, and how would that affect our economies? Well, if you go back to 2008 and 2009, we start to see the commodity run up right here. Now, those of you alive back then, you understand stocks collapsed, people pulled back on spending, fuel prices rose. That's one thing. If your fuel price rises, you can hitchhike, you can ride a bike, you can take the train, you can grab a bus, that's fine. You can mitigate, or you can find a different way to solve that problem. Food, if you don't eat, you die. There's no substituting that. There's no other way to, I guess if you eat algae all the time, but still you need some other supplements. So, I'm going to take you through the solar cycles, how they affected society in the past, and then what I envision going forward. So I'm going to start off here with Bagan, and that's in Myanmar, formerly known as Burma. Now, I'll explain why I chose this slide. A, because it collapsed around 800 AD. This was directly related to the Maunder, or not the Maunder minimum, but a different solar minimum that took place at that time, and the Tang dynasty got wiped out in China. Sunspots show you how much activity there is on the sun. And over longer terms, 11 years, we can see how much activity there's been on the sun. And then ultimately, these longer cycles dictate the civilization cycle. Everything related to the rise and fall of civilizations and the rise and fall of empires is related to the food production. No food, no soldiers. No food, everything else stops. They're too emaciated to even work. They can't think straight, disease sweeps through, and you're done. You have to wait until the sun turns its power back on again electromagnetically, and then we can get higher food production. I used to buy coffee in Myanmar, and the reason I started with Bagan is because I worked in Myanmar, and when I was there, I was a coffee buyer. The new plantings that they had to plant in the fields because of cold damage and death to the plants was 14%. So they had to overplant 14% because the die-off from cold. Now, if I say Burma to you or Myanmar, what's the first thing you think? Hot. Yeah, so for me too, I used to be a deep global warming believer. Yeah, I used to. Yeah, I bought it hook, line, and sinker. No longer, because once I saw the cold damage up there, I thought to myself, something's very wrong. So I was looking for answers anyway to see if we could get new supply for the next couple of years because they have to plant and it takes a little bit to bring on new production. Fine. This is Myanmar right here. It lies between 20 degrees north latitude and 22 degrees north latitude. And it's not supposed to be a cold country where you get crop losses from cold. So that took me out into this destination of using my mind to find out what's going on, why is it getting cooler? And right now, if you look up especially in Laos and in Thailand, they're experiencing the same thing. Cold weather, crop losses. It's even killing cabbages now. So the sweep of cold across Southeast Asia and Vietnam, every year now it's snowing, record snows in Sapa in Vietnam. Now the area where the coffee is approximately right here. And it's over on the map here as well in the Shan State. These are the plantings I'm talking about. Well, these little smaller plants are very susceptible to cold, so they would get killed off quite easily when the temperatures dropped below freezing for several nights in a row, and it didn't really warm up during the day. And then this is when I talk about new plantings, that's exactly what I mean. Can I move to the next? There we go, boom. So and then they had to insulate the greenhouses, which was something they never had to do before to keep those new plantings even ready to plant into the fields because they would get killed inside the nursery, which was strange for them, so they put extra layers of netting over to try to protect everything. And they start with the seedlings and they go on up. And those were the ones that were killed. Also, the top leaf damage on there, the top leaves of the plants would actually get frost burned, if you will. And they're using silver oak cover here. Now, the silver oaks had no problem, but the coffee was very susceptible to the cold. And this is the gold we were after here, literally going back into coffee exporting out of Myanmar. Incredible origin coffees there. It's a magical place. And I'll tell you what, in 2012, there was no Wi-Fi signal at all. It was just opening up to the world at that point, and they hadn't covered everything with Wi-Fi signals and towers. And I tell you, the energy feeling out there was so much different than almost anywhere you've ever experienced, except you go to national parks. And this was countrywide. It's a magical place, and it still is. And for those of you who like coffee, I thought I would throw this slide in here. Natural dried, and they were experimenting with different Cantamore varieties. And then we had the slats out here those were washed, double washed, if you know coffee. I know some of you do, so I thought I'd throw that in there. So I'm David DuByne, and I run the YouTube channel Adapt 2030, and I also have the podcast Mini Ice Age Conversations. And this was led because of my experience in Myanmar. So I'm just a regular guy who was buying coffee that found all this information out, and it shook me so much, and I realized how much of an effect it'll have on our societies that I decided to really delve into it and try to make videos and explain it to other people. Now, this is a reconstruction map of how the temperature dropped during the Maunder Minimum in the 1600s. Now, you can clearly see when they talk about global warming, Alaska's warmer. Well, it was warmer in the Maunder Minimum, so what do you expect? They're grabbing onto natural cycles in the news or the media or the narrative and trying to explain, you're the cause of it, but you're not, because look under Greenland here. Greenland's melting. Wait a second, it got warmer in southern Greenland during the Maunder Minimum. What happened? It's a natural cycle. It's not you. It's the sun. It's not CO2, in my firm opinion. Now look over here in Morocco, we see this, record snows, all these things happening. In the United States, we get the same band here with the record cold, all-time record coldest temperatures ever recorded in America this year. And look right here with Germany, and I have some ideas about Germany, and we get some places in Asia right here. And also, where did it cool down in the Maunder Minimum? Right here, this is right at the edge of where Myanmar is. And here it is, it even shows the cold dot right there, and I was shocked. This was my kind of waking moment, saying, wait a second, it even showed the drop in temperatures. And the temperatures are dropping again right there. So I started to look for more answers. And then I started to look back in historical cycles. Chinese dynasties collapsing. And what was talked about is these specific areas that were going offline that affected food production in the kingdoms. Go back to the different dynasties, the Yuan dynasty, the Tang dynasty. And you keep going back, and they keep collapsing on 400-year cycles, which is also interesting. But these are the particular areas of crop losses that they spoke about. And here we are in North Korea this year, mega drought. Well, this is what happened. They couldn't grow food. That's why the kingdoms and the emperors couldn't hold the mandate from heaven, is because they couldn't feed the people. And the people got angry, right? You don't eat. If I don't feed you, you're going to be angry at me. You're supposed to be the leader, and I can't get it. So anyway, I did these in 2017, calling out where and historically we should be looking for crop losses moving forward into 2020, 2021, and sure enough, we're starting to hit on some very exact instances. So I drew these out in 2017. The sun. Where's our Earth? You have a choice of planets down here. Where's our Earth? Yeah, the tiny little speck on the right, or the left, actually. Boom, there it is. Now you realize the significance of how large the sun is compared to our Earth. And they say that the sun has no effect on our planet. Okay. So these solar cycles, if you look back through history, they are absolutely, they're reflective of how much solar activity there was, but they're also reflective of how much food could be grown at a certain time in history. So we're here at solar cycle 24, and we're actually right at the bottom here. So in the news, you'll start to see a lot of articles about solar minimum, but that's the regular 11-year cycle, not the longer cycles that we're getting into on the 400-year or 2,000-year cycles. Now, if you couple these up, well, we can go back 4 solar cycles here, take us back into the 1960s, and then we can couple those again, and we can go back 120 years here. But you have to realize, even though all these coupled going back several hundred years, on a 4,000-year temperature chart up here, we only cover this little square box and what they said. The Earth is warming from this point. They're covering this much of the historical climate record. One look at that, where there's other places where it's been warmer, and several times in the past. And I thought, well, let me show you that whiteout so you could see what those are. We have the medieval warming period, which ClimateGate was very clearly caught trying to disappear that period to make it appear that it was cooler in the past and everything was warming. Yeah, ClimateGate. Please look up those emails. It'll shock you what they wrote in there on how to make it appear that things were warming by cooling the past. Yeah, geoengineering, I'm going to get right into that. It's cosmic radiation management. Yeah, I want to blend that in, especially with your energy device coming down from space in the new electrified atmosphere. So we have the medieval warming period. We also go back and we can come into the Roman warming period. And also that's where vineyards were growing further north up in Scotland. Vineyards up there. And the Minoan warming period was kind of the apex of the heat on our planet in this last 10,000 years of warm. So if we take it back in time, because I want you to remember this, I'm going to reference the Bronze Age once again. So we keep going back in time and back in time. We have 500 years, 1,000 years, 1,500 years, 2,000, 2,500, 3,000. And then we get into this thing called the Bronze Age, around 3,500 years ago to 4,000 years. Bad things happen when it gets cold. That's why I put the chart here. We can start to take it. I'll even read them for you here, because I know in the back maybe it's a little too small for you to see. Harappa Kingdom in India collapsed. That's because they just dropped this much in temperature. From the top of the Minoan warming period, the Mycenaeans collapsed, and then we get into the Yellow River freezes, and there's frost in China, and the Shang dynasty collapses at that time. We got the disasters and plagues and famines in Egypt. They're down here at the bottom of the cooling. From their high point, which is actually higher than where we are now, so can you imagine when we cool further, what's going to happen here? It's going to be interesting. And then we come back down here and we find the Han Dynasty collapsed again on their regular period of 400 years. And we come down here, the European Dark Ages. Whenever it gets colder, our societies struggle to grow enough food to keep their citizens happy, if you will. And again, I wanted to bring you, this had a little bit different list. The Mayan cities collapsing in their final areas. Year without a summer, the Mayan Golden Age suddenly collapses. Well, why did they suddenly collapse one year? They decided to collapse this year? Well, they were around for how long? And then, oops, we just decided to collapse now. They don't choose to, they're forced to. And you know, these proxies that you keep finding through history, you can find how many candles were used for funerary rites during the Black Death. So you can see approximately the population and how many people died on how many candles they bought in the monasteries. But this is a significant one. This is where the witches were burned in the witch trials. And why would I even bring that up? This is from 1550 to 1700 AD in Europe. And this is another proxy, a way to see where the really bad weather occurred in parts of Europe here. Now, where the witch trials were, or where they burned the witches.
That was global warming, wasn't
Yeah, it was global warming too, yeah. You get the red dots, where they burned or executed somebody at that time based on witchcraft trials. So you can see the density runs through certain areas, and then what you would try to do is then match that with what you foresee in reconstruction on temperature maps. So we know exactly where some of the real heaviest effects will be in Europe based on what happened here, where they were blaming somebody for the bad weather. NASA, never a straight answer, but they have pretty magnetic field charts here. So I want to talk about the sun and the earth connecting together, because this really explains everything. And when you can talk to somebody in the global warming debate about it not being CO2, but it being the sun, you have to kind of understand this magnetic field connection before you can get out into it. So they put out really pretty drawings, and we have a North Pole here, and then we have the South Pole here, and the magnetic field lines are going off. But where are they going to? Yeah, they're connecting to the sun. But look at this pretty one. Oh, they look so symmetrical, and they look so amazing. Like, wow, they're so perfect and circular. Not really. These are the magnetic field lines coming off the sun in a reconstruction magnetically, and really what they're looking at through different types of satellites from infrared and something like this. This is what the magnetic field lines look like coming off the sun. And in reality, this is what it looks like coupling with the Earth. So you're getting all these twisted magnetic lines, and it's not straight, and nothing's really beautifully round and overture and curving and connecting. And I showed you the size of the sun earlier. And if we're connected that much to the sun electromagnetically, what do you think is going to happen when the sun discharges or decreases its activity state into another Maunder minimum type cooling? Our Earth is going to be heavily affected. And it's connected electrically and magnetically, and we can call it electromagnetism, and they connect together. And we're going to talk about ionized atmosphere and how the governments are piggybacking on top of a natural cycle to create heavier effects. Now think about how far are we from the sun? Yeah, 93 million miles, and then they call that one astronomical unit, 1 AU. Now the magnetic field from the sun goes out 100 AU, out to the bow shock out there. You got to realize, the forces from the sun go 100 times further than from us to the sun, further out into the edge of our solar system. Now we are 100 times closer than even do you think we're going to be affected, our Earth? Of course we are. Again, I'll bring you to the size scale here. I mean, we're way down here on the bottom, barely a little tiny thing, and we're so close to it. Yet they say there's no effects. No, sun drives nothing. No, it's totally you. It's CO2, bad polluter. Pay your tax. Now, what I've done here is because we're in the UK, I thought I would pull up the mean central England temperatures from 1659 to 2018. Bring you back home here. So what we're doing is we're taking a look at the solar cycles in different time frames and then looking at the temperature drops according to the solar activity. And then also, what's the correlation? Inversely is when we get higher solar activity, the temperatures rise. So we've seen this through history, and once you understand the cycle, you can start to look at it in a different way, and you understand when the solar cycle decreases in activity state, then, well, the planet's going to cool somewhere. We're going to get a bunch of shifts in the atmosphere, and this is not going to grow good. We're going to have a very difficult time continuing to grow grains, and this is what I focus on mainly is the grains. Now, understand fruits really being heavily affected across Europe and also different vegetable plants, et cetera, in the United States and California. This is our main thing that keeps our societies together. If we don't have enough food, our societies collapse, period. We need the food, and we need a lot of it to keep everybody well-fed. If you're not well-fed, your immune system's depleted, and diseases can run right through you so much more quickly. They find that, when they're testing people's bodies that they dig up from the bubonic plague and different types of plagues through history, they were depleted on almost everything, and that's how they're overwhelmed their immune systems, and this disease that we could normally fight off just jumped right in and took over. This is what happens when there's not enough food. People become angry, things get too expensive, the markets are shattered even back then when we talk about it. The armies in the UK here used to have to accompany the grain shipments because there were so many bandits on the road trying to steal the wheat coming out of the harvest that they had to put army with every single shipment. So then we take a look at skyrocketing food prices, and we see this around the world. What happens when people get really hungry and they're going to die or their family is going to starve to death before they get to that food source? Oh, that's terrible. No cannibalization, empty shelves. No, but you do laugh. Cannibalization always comes through when we have these food shortages. When people are going to starve to death or eat something, they will eat a corpse first before they will die. That's the level. Yeah, it's been routinely documented that that's what happens. They eat things that you would think were truly inedible. And the siege of Stalingrad, I don't know if you know much about the siege of Stalingrad. This is World War II. They used to trade recipes for boiled belts. Belts. They used to cook that because there was some broth and nutrition in there. They were licking the glue off the wallpaper back then because it was mainly, it didn't have all the chemicals in it did today. But they were eating things like, fur coats. They would strip all the fur and try to boil that and make some kind of soup or anything to fill the belly. They were desperate. And if your belly's not full, you're going to get angry. And a friend of mine says, David, I understand what you're saying, but my son's in 5th grade, and I just can't explain it to him because I'm always talking, do you have something that you can create that I can show to a 5th grader? And I said, well, yeah, I'll work on it here. So it's like a diamond, actually, where there's different sides of it. It's not just one flat thing where it gets cold, and then it's not like that at all. We have these variants in weather in the extremes. It's not always going to be cold. We're going to get some normal years in between the cold and, let's say, upsetting years. But the crop harvest, the sun, they call it going to sleep, so I tried to put a sleeping sun here. We get the cosmic ray increases. We're going to get a little more volcanism, massive floods, massive floods, and also they call it, rivers from the sky. It's an atmospheric compression event. I'll come into that. And then we get the cosmic rays, and then our jet streams are going to shift and have begun shifting. Well, this was planned for global warming, right? They hijacked a natural cycle. They knew it was coming. They knew these would be the effects. And they had to explain it to you because they knew everybody in the real world would see it with their own eyes, and then you would start to ask questions. They had a ready-made answer for you, global warming. Well, these effects are mainly based on solar activity, and here's what's going to happen with us moving forward. The media is going to distract you like no other. They want you to forget what's happening with your food prices and the weather changes, and it's going to be Hollywood-esque, every single event. It's going to have to get more audacious, if you will. Now, the police state, the more surveillance is to surveil you in social media, to see your behavioral patterns, because based on that, they can know if you'll be a threat, you'll be a help. Your social media profile is giving them the information how you're going to behave if there's shortages. And they're using these details about you to see if you're a threat or a help during this time. Heavier police presence, that never would have been ushered in except for 9/11. And it's really quirky that it started then and that we need it now. And it took 20 years to build it up, and whoa, it's ready right now at this very time. A little strange. Media's in overdrive. Now, please notice this. Every single story is about stability right now, and it's almost spooky. Every single story out there that you're reading in the media is about everything's stable. It'll continue to be stable. It'll be great next year. Everything's fine. Just, go back to work. It's all good. And then we get the silencing through the social media, where they're ghosting people off of different feeds. Now, this is one of the most important charts here, and Valentina Zarkova and her team with, you got Shepard, Zarkov, and Zarkova. They're here in the UK. They put out this chart here, and I want to explain it to you because it's based on magnetism, and these are magnetic fields of the sun, so we have the polarity of positive and negative, if you will. Now, these waves are like sound waves in Bose headset. Sometime if you put the opposite wave in, it'll cancel each other out when it gets in there. It's a noise-canceling headset. Well, we can get magnetic wave-canceling effects as well, and that's exactly what I'm showing you here. What they've done is they looked at the sun in the in different ways. It's a quadrupole. It has 4 different magnetic poles on it. Our Earth has 2. We've got a North Pole and a South Pole. But there's 4 poles on the sun, and then it's wrapped inside a torus wave, which I'll show you. But this is the forecast moving out. So the wider the wave is, the more of a canceling effect it has in terms of solar activity. So when it gets really wide like this, the solar activity is declining and absolutely going back into something we haven't seen in centuries. This only occurs once every 400 years. Now, the intensity of it is to be debated on how intense it's going to be. Is it a heavier, more powerful cycle overlapping and overriding on this 400-year cycle? Meaning, is it a combination of 400-year cycles as we go through, and then something heavier is coming? But as we divide, I put the lines in here and divided out with the red dots. So there's a 2 to 3 year lag period because solar activity happens today. It's not going to affect. There's a little bit of lag period behind. So as we go into 2021 here, this is where we really get into the intensity of the solar changes, because again, it's a couple of years lag time. So think about all the changes we were seeing in 2016 are manifesting right now, or 2017. They're just not sure if it's a 2 or a 3 year lag. It's still under debate. But anyway, we're a couple years behind on the solar activity in terms of the real effects happening on the Earth. So this scares me a little bit, actually. If we're down here and these are the effects that are happening now on our planet, what's going to happen when we get in here? And that's coming next year, 2021, 22. This is what's happened. This is where our solar activity is taking us, and we already see the crop losses mounting across the planet. If we're getting huge crop losses in this little area, what's going to happen here? This is why I believe governments are trying to mitigate panic and not really tell everybody. But I want to explain what a quadrupole is and how this whole forecast came out. Now, you and me, it's kind of difficult to understand a quadrupole. 4 magnetic poles on a celestial object. 4, not 2. We have a north and a south. This one has 4, our sun. So we've got north-north, south-south, if you will. And they're in layers as well. We got 2 layers. That's why I call it a double dynamo in the sun, because we got 2 layers with 4 magnetic poles. And if that's not difficult enough to understand, then it's wrapped in a torus magnetic wave. So we have North Pole, South Pole, all wrapped in and continually spinning with this donut shape of looping inside the torus magnetic field. Now, once they added the torus magnetic field in there and we get the looping effect, then they got the forecast. And this is what the forecast is based off of, are these 8 different variables in the sun's magnetic field all affecting on each other. They've gone back in history 200,000 years, and they brought it out 800 years, and they're above a 98% statistical correct correlation on that. People have been trying to do the math and try to disprove them. Nobody's done it yet. If they have, you'll hear about it in the news, but nobody, after 2 years, has been able to undo their math to prove that these cycles are interlooping as such. Now, this comes off the same report, off Zarkova's report here. Again, this was done 2015, then they updated it in 2018. The modern grand minimum, 2020 to 2055, ouch. We're going to go a very long time without being able to grow a lot of food. Now, the entry into this event here is, this is our solar cycle we're in right now, and as we get down into the next solar cycle, and then we just drop off a cliff. So this drop off the cliff right here is approximately 2024 going down into 2030 or so, and at this bottom point here, the person who put this report out is calling on governments around the world to stockpile food right now for the lean years of 2028 through 2032. The person who wrote this report is telling and begging governments to get ready for this by stockpiling food right now for these changes that are coming. And they're forecastable. It's not like we've seen this before. It's forecastable. So you start to look for the signs. What do we see a sign? There must be something telling us the planet's cooling somewhere. We've got to start with the upper atmosphere first, and here we are. They call it the chill of the solar minimum. The thermosphere, this is a layer in the upper atmosphere edging on space. And here's where we are, and we've actually dropped now and broken that record of what they've had here. So the thermosphere is actually cooled beyond into the actual record-breaking points already, so that has been confirmed, and it was expected anyway. Now this is going to continue to go down in, and they don't know where the depth or where it will stop. They really don't. We're in uncharted territory for our own modern society of instruments. We don't know where it's going to stop. We've seen it before. We know that it's going to have an effect in the next layer of the atmosphere, and the next layer down, and then here on the ground surface. when we talk about the sun connected to the earth, and I showed you those images of all the interconnected magnetic field lines, etc., I'm just going to make it real super simple and say positive charge and negative charge, like your battery, plus minus. Now, over the last 400 years, I should say, well, there was a little dip in the Dalton minimum, so 400, solidly 200 plus years, the Earth and the Sun have had a chance to equalize their electrical inflows to each other, magnetically, electrically. They've had a chance to equalize for over 200 years plus, because the Dalton minimum wasn't so strong, so I'll even go out on a limb and say for the last 400 years we've been equalizing charge. Well, the Sun is quickly stepping down. If it's going to step down in its state and we're still highly charged, where's that electrical field going to go to? It needs to discharge somehow. Yeah, it's going to discharge, I don't know how, well, I'll try to give you, it's called the global electric circuit. And this is what governments are piggybacking on right here. They know the atmosphere is going to become highly charged on a natural cycle, so what they're going to try to do is ride in on, geoengineering and the delivery of, and I'm going to say, Deborah, the device you showed yesterday of beaming electricity from space 25 years ago was undoable, not because of the tech, because of the atmosphere not being highly enough charged to deliver that. It would be like, let's say this is a copper cable, and then I would cut and cut. The electrical flow would normally go through an entire cable, but if you cut out a section, the current wouldn't go through it. Now, if I put a highly charged plasma field or some kind of electrical ion chamber right in there, that current could jump through the air, literally. And this is what they're piggybacking on. They're expecting amplified effects from a natural cycle using all of what we're seeing right now with the particulate metals in the sky. Now, bringing back to the effects that we should see, and again, we should be seeing things if it's truly in play. So here we go. Things that were considered incredibly rare, like never ever seen, so much that when you would see it or capture it on film once, it would make front page news because it was that rare. Here we got blue auroral jets, common now. This is an electrical discharge up into one of the magnetic field lines coming down from the sun. So our electrical field is actually trying to charge back up and connect to the sun. Red sprites, once unheard of. Even things of myth and legend. And here we are, now they're common. Almost every electrical storm across the planet is showing these red sprites now. And then we have these, where does lightning usually discharge to? Yeah, it goes from the ground down. Well, now we're getting upward lightning coming off the earth. Well, this is, again, it's an equalizing charge. That overcharge is trying to jump out and do something. It's trying to reconnect with the field lines. So we're starting to see this thing, and I highly encourage you to look this up. It's called the global electric circuit, and it explains how the ionosphere is being highly charged on a natural cycle. And inside, before we hit to the Earth's crust, this whole area of the atmosphere is more highly charged, ionized. So we get incredible weather storms and so many electrical effects of things that are driven by the motion of this electromagnetism. And especially when they're trying to charge it even higher with geoengineering and then run their experiments and 5G and everything, they're trying to use this natural, more highly charged atmosphere to make everything happen. Now, once this dissipates after solar cycle 27, they're going to have a very difficult time continuing the programs that they're doing now because the atmosphere itself will come back into a state of equilibrium and it just won't have the charge it does today or marching forward more highly charged. So their window of opportunity to do everything you're talking about from 5G to geoengineering, everything is squeezed into just literally 25 years or less. They have a window of natural opportunity to amplify what they're trying to accomplish. Yeah, if we had a highly charged sun like we did in the 1990s, everything they're doing now would be just moot. They couldn't do it because it takes the atmospheric charge to continue what they want to do. It's just not going to work. It is now, though. Now, is anybody familiar in science when you discover something, you get to name it, right? Yeah, part of the game. All right, so this is a plasma filament rope. And it was only seen for the first time in 2017, and they named it Steve. These guys were out drinking, and they noticed it, and one of the guys' name was Steve. I forget his last name. But they named it Steve. Hey, have you seen Steve? Look, there's Steve. Now, this had never been sighted before in the night sky. First time ever. Plasma streamer coming down. which means that the atmosphere is becoming electrified enough that a plasma is now more highly charged that it's becoming visible. Before it wasn't. I mean, that field line was still there, but you just couldn't see it. It didn't have enough charge to turn it to glow mode or turn it on where you could see it. So they saw it the first time, 2017, but then last year they seen it 3 times. Now, one thing you do notice is the streamer here, fine, it's really compact and it's in a very tight line. We come here and we get this, they call it picket fence, that's behind this aurora. They call it picket fence aurora with a field line current there. And then this one is really surprising because you can actually see the twisting ropes of current in between each other there coming down. Yeah, it's incredibly amplified. You got to realize that from this to this is 1 year. That's how much change is occurring right now, how quickly this is happening. So I want to jump you back in ancient history. You know, the petroglyphs, a lot of them have been proven that they saw plasma discharges across the atmosphere, and that's where there's a certain period of time, around, say, 18,000, 19,000 years ago, when they came out of, or were coming out of the first iteration of the glaciation, before the Younger Dryas cooled again. There were some huge atmospheric discharges where they saw this, and then, you know, a lot of our petroglyphs that we see are based on real-world events that they saw in the atmosphere that make no sense to us today. But the plasma discharge that they saw, like lightning bolts from heaven, literally, is what this is all about. Now, I put this here. This is that ionized rope that you saw earlier right here. So we're beginning to get the base construct of what they're seeing for Squatter Man already in our atmosphere. This is a little like, you know, something's changed, definitely. I'm very sure governments know, because I know somebody who advises our president back in the United States. So I know for sure that at least the American government knows what's happening, because I know one of the advisors who's advising them on what's happening. Every government on the planet knows this. I'm saying every single one, but would they tell you? Maybe not. Why not? Yeah. Now, solar wind, this is another thing. Like a very active sun is going to be having billions of tons of particles rolling out off the sun, and solar wind. So also, if there were effects from the sun, the solar wind should slow down. Slow down, not stop. It literally stopped. And I said, well, when was this? Oh, that was January 12th of this year. The solar wind actually stopped enough to where our magnetic field ballooned out, because there was nothing compressing it. There was nothing pushing on it to lock our magnetic field in, or otherwise known as the magnetosphere. We weren't expecting solar wind stoppage till like 2027 or 25, somewhere in there, but it's occurring now, which is years ahead of where it should be occurring. Again, another look at the solar wind. This is plasma density, like really how much of those particles are packed into a cubic centimeter blasting toward the Earth. Solar wind, you can see the magnetosphere is very compressed. Like if you blow on a balloon hard enough, you can see your breath compressing around something, or maybe like a flower, or not a flower, but one of those weeds before it turns into the white and blows away. If you blow on it and they're still intact, you can make it bend around something. Consider that your own solar wind on the flower. And then we come here, no solar wind. So you can see when it's compressed and we have solar wind on our magnetosphere, we get that nice tight compression. It locks our jet streams in place. When there's no solar wind, it just completely expands out. And this is happening now, not in the forecast. This shouldn't be happening for, another 5 to 6 years at least on our forecast that we were originally doing, but it's happening now. Governments are going to take advantage of this. Cosmic rays, and I'll come back into the cosmic rays here. Now, there's an inverse on this, and the reason I bring up cosmic rays is they're charged particles. They're helping, that's what's electrifying part of our atmosphere and creating more cloud cover. So then, again, government programs with geoengineering, et cetera, are riding on top of the natural cycle of the intertwining of electromagnetism and cosmic rays, too. So here, it's an inverse. When we have high solar activity, here we go. When we have the high solar activity, we come down, it's low amount of cosmic rays penetrating our atmosphere. When we come into low solar activity, we get a high amount of cosmic rays, but there's a delay of usually around 9 months, because I put the arrows there so you could see it. So the peak's not exactly at the bottom of the solar cycle, it's offset a little bit to the right, about 9 months or so. So again, these lags in effect, They're not instantaneous when something happens on the sun. There's a little lag behind. Now, we're coming into this cosmic ray density here that's the highest ever recorded, even back into the 1800s when they were using cloud chambers and figuring out X-rays back in the day. They know what's happened in at least the last 120 years with X-rays. And again, what they can do is they can reconstruct what happened with the cosmic rays by using beryllium-10 when they measured in the soils, or ice cores mainly. So even though we weren't alive and we didn't have the instruments at that time, it left a signature. And there's different ways we can look at these different signatures with these different isotopes. Beryllium-10 measures how many cosmic rays there were. So if we're heading into the Maunder minimum, we're looking at something that we should have never seen before because it's going to be really high. And we're here and expected to go at least to the Maunder minimum level for cosmic rays or higher, depending on how strong the cycle is. We can come back and the sunspot, so remember the group sunspot number, and if we do trace this back in history, low solar activity, what happened in the early 1800s, 1815 something? Yeah, year without a summer, wars, what?
Charles took over UK banking system.
Yeah, how were they able to do that? A weakened public, probably, from... But you start to see when you get these dips in the solar activity, you start to get wars and different kind of interactions, economic stress, and different types of things like this happening. I'm going to explain as simply as I can. Cosmic rays come blasting in, and they have a charge with them. And what they do is that charge obviously attracts something. And what it does, it attracts these little condensation particles that in turn connect to another condensation particle, which in turn turn to a cloud droplet, and then they make clouds. So the more cosmic rays we get, the more clouds we're going to get. But at the same time, the more charge we have in our atmosphere, the more they're going to be able to use geoengineering to get a higher charge into the atmosphere. They're piggybacking on the natural cycle to get the highest amount of effect that they could never get, ever, if we didn't have this happening right now in terms of our cycle. Now, this comes out from the Global Warming Policy Forum. Now they're finding that there's up to 7 times more action inside these cascading galactic cosmic rays than previously thought, which means that if they thought 1 cloud formed because of the interaction, now they're like, oh no, 7 clouds are going to form. But also at the same time, the electrical activity is going to be 7 times higher. It's a trickle down. It actually cascades. Like this is 1 cosmic ray breaking and slamming into other stuff. So I want to come up to the cosmic radiation management here. Well, I will in a second. But the cosmic ray monitoring, again, if we're going to start to see higher effects, we should really use science to see, are there changes happening? And sure enough, right up there we're going. And it's not going to stop here. We're going to be going into solar minimum and continuing to go to this grand solar minimum for another 20 plus years. And it's just going to keep going up and up and up, way up here, where we've never seen it before. We don't even know the effects, really, except rivers from the sky is an effect that is expected. So I have a lot of people asking me, hey, what are these particles you're talking about? Dude, you're talking about particle. What's a particle? Okay, so we all know what atoms are, and there's neutrons and protons. And then we also get some gamma rays and X-rays. These are also slamming into our atmosphere. They're all charged. They all have a little tiny charge with them, and they create clouds. High-speed electrons, those are from the sun, blasting in. We get all these, and when remember, they try to confuse you using super high complex lexicon. So ions or ionic charge just means higher charge, like more electric charge. So if your phone and you plug it in, it's charging, right? You're getting more electric in there. That's exactly what that means by ionizing the atmosphere. You've got to use simpler verbiage to understand it. Places in the northern hemisphere seem to be experiencing higher cosmic ray concentrations than places further south, or I don't know. California is not increasing at the rate of Maine and Washington. But what I just showed you over here in Norway, up here in, Finland, again, these northern latitudes, but again, this is where we're growing crops up here. So if we're going to get heavier rainfall, bigger blizzards, different hailstorms, etc., it's going to be right in our crop zones. And this is how all this dovetails in. Now, what is the purpose of this geoengineering here? We have so many conjectures, and Deborah gave a great talk last night. Thank you so much for enlightening us on what you see and how you see it. There is a definite purpose to this. Now, I want to take it to a step further. Now, there's different layers of this geoengineering onion, if you will, and they're all riding on the same electrified atmosphere due to a natural cycle. Cosmic radiation management. It is a different way to look at geoengineering. It's a multi-purpose program. These nanometals that they're putting in, spraying across, also nullify the charge of these cosmic rays that come in. When a cosmic ray collides with one of those nanometals, it loses its charge. It doesn't form clouds. So another conjecture is that they are using another layer of this geoengineering program is for cosmic radiation management to slow down the effect of cloud building across the planet to reduce the amount of megafloods that occur in every storm. To not create clouds. The whole purpose is to take away the charge of that cosmic ray so it doesn't get a charge. So when these cosmic rays come in, they're charged positively. They have a charge with it. And other things attract to it. And that's how it forms a cloud at the end, because it's a small little particle, and then it gets a little bit more attracted, and ooh, you have two, and now it's a little bit bigger, and then something else jumps onto it, and it's a little bigger, and then whoosh, and then you finally get a cloud droplet. And this is how it works. So when the cosmic rays come slamming in and they hit a piece of barium, strontium, aluminum in the atmosphere, boom, their charge is gone. They can attract nothing at that point. They're just it's just an inert particle. It lost its charge. It hit the metal. So you got to realize that if you're a government and you understand that this is going to cascade and create massive amounts of clouds and serious floods, a geoengineer, we can also use that to mitigate some of this cloud formation. For now. So that's kind of another way to look at, what the geoengineering program, a different layer of the onion for a purpose, a government purpose again. This is for military application to stop cloud building in some areas or encourage cloud building in other areas if they want to flood people out. Because they could just stop spraying in a certain place and the clouds naturally would form the cosmic rays and you would get massive floods. And we've seen incredible flooding across the planet. Now here, and again, a natural cycle is happening, but the Harvard research program, and it's a tin hat foil, right, sure. Geoengineering program from Harvard is now live, and they're coming out publicly and telling you that the Harvard geoengineering program's coming out, it's here, it's called ScopeX. Rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Made for the media, ScopeX, sounds fun, easy to talk, everybody can write it, everybody can say it. And it's easy to remember, isn't it? ScopeX. But try to say stratospheric controlled perturbation, and that kind of doesn't roll off the tongue so easily. Again, they're riding on a natural cycle. What they're going to do is use ScopeX. They're going to try to cool the atmosphere with calcium carbonate, or so they say. And then once they do it, they're going to say, look, we're responsible for cooling the climate. You just need to keep paying us. Because termination shock means when they stop doing it, we'll get runaway global warming again. So they're going to take credit for the cooling on a natural cycle, and they're going to try to make you continually pay for infinitum because they cooled the planet, which is ridiculous. And these two guys are two of the most dangerous humans on the planet at the moment, in my opinion. And I'm not ad hominuming or trying to damage their reputation, but what they're trying to do in terms of messing with our atmosphere to cool the planet is criminal. I never consented to anybody cooling my planet and allowing them to spray the skies to do such a thing and taking public credit for it, and it's already live in the spring of 2019. So everybody who said, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist because you talk about geoengineering, well, please refer them to this sun dimming experiments from Harvard. That's live now. And it's ridiculous that Harvard's coming out, and they want to try to mimic the Pinatubo eruption and cool the planet 0.6 of a degree. Now what happens if we get a real volcanic eruption and they have all the materials up there, and we get a real Pinatubo eruption again? How long will it take for the last particle that they sprayed to fall out of the atmosphere? And what kind of combination of real volcanic ash, sulfur dioxide, combining with what they put up there, we might get something run away that they never planned on, and I don't know if they took that into consideration in their models or not. Now, we're going to get more cosmic rays based on this, too. The magnetic poles are wandering, and this is not a scare thing, and please don't be like, oh, it's scary. It's just the magnetic poles are wandering, And it's really interesting that it looks like a continuing. Now notice this little one, and this is where the magnetic pole went back in 200 AD. This chart here is from 1500 AD, how the pole moved around all over the place. It started in 200 AD, and then obviously it jumped back from where it was here, and it moved around to 1500 AD, and then we can grab it again at 1900, and we can see it's continually moving. It looks like it's going to move in the exact same area again. So things that are moving on magnetic field lines, such as whales or different kind of insect migrations, they're going to be affected by this. And also we're going to get more galactic cosmic rays because this is on the move and the magnetosphere is slightly bending. Yes, absolutely, electromagnetically. So you got to realize we're conduits ourselves. Our bodies are conduits. We're receivers, our antenna, if you will. But as the sun's electrical state changes, we're also going to experience changes too. Have you seen people behaving strangely around you? Yeah, their cognitive abilities are off a bit, right? Do you get the feeling that something's just not right these days? Yeah. This is all electrical in nature. Like our bodies are electrical, we're electromagnetic beings. So I was going to come to that later, but I'll bring it up now. We're electromagnetic beings, so we're going to be affected as well by the sun. And you see routinely through history, at points, humanity wakes up and throws off the chains of what was really overseeing them, and it's no longer acceptable to be ruled this particular way, or economy can't work that way, and we see it again and again. When we hit these low activity solar areas, it seems that society changes in ways that we've never seen before in terms of just the way we process the information of what's acceptable and not acceptable on how these, I don't even like to call them the elite, the people, the sociopaths running the place. Yeah. It's no longer acceptable, and it seems to occur in mass, where there's a mass awakening, and I'm really hoping that does happen here in the very near future. But people forget so quickly, and then suddenly they try to get their control mechanisms back in on top. So what I wanted to do is show you, this is from European Space Agency. They had this satellite called Swarm out there that was measuring the magnetic field and how much it was changing. Now, oh, here we are. So this was in 2005 here, the magnetic field, the North Pole magnetically was right here, and then in 2015 it's moved to here. They stopped giving us information in 2016. Like, what happened? Why aren't they giving us any more information on how the poles are moving? This affects the magnetosphere and affects how many cosmic rays are coming in. And what they're finding also, the decay rate is 10 times faster than normal at 5% per decade. But what if it's really 10% per decade or 20 when they stop publishing? There's a lot of people are thinking it's occurring faster than they're really telling us. And again, the link between the low cloud cover and cosmic rays is very well known. So I'm going to come on here. Now, Heinrich Svensmark, the cosmos, we saw this earlier today in this chart. This is really what our little solar system's way down over here. This is our galaxy. And you think we're not interconnected in the galaxy somehow, too? I mean, we're connected to the sun, but our sun is connected to another star system somewhere else electromagnetically. These Birkeland currents are connecting us to something else as well. So there has to be other changes going on in different parts of our galaxy as well. Now, what happens with these low-lying clouds is they start to form in a very certain specific layer, and they're measurable, and they're always forming between 15,000 and 18,500 feet. So when jet streams are colliding together, you're going to get more what they call like rivers from the sky. And I highly encourage you to watch this free movie. It's on YouTube by Heinrich Svensmark. It's called The Cloud Mystery. It can explain everything about cosmic rays way better than I can, and it's really easy to understand, and you could see the pushback in the scientific community when he releases information. Cloud Mystery. It'll explain why these record floods are happening. Now, as our magnetosphere gets weaker, our jet streams are going to start to go out of their normal flows along with the cloud bands and the cloud patterns. Like, you juice this up and add in an extra 20% cloud cover on our planet, things are going to have to push and pull to find new ways to flow in areas. So if you get a bunching flow, is what they call it, a bunching flow, you're going to get a river from the sky because an enormous amount of new cloud here that usually would just easily roll over suddenly bunches up and it connects together. Again, we know through history these galactic cosmic rays have an influence on what they call the intertropical convergence zone, and this affects the monsoon through India, different parts of Southeast Asia, and ultimately around the equator. And it's mappable. They already know what's going to happen. And this is the whole thing I go back at. The food shortages are based on this. So you can see where it was drier in the Little Ice Age, or Maunder Minimum, and where it was wetter. But this is the flow change that they're expecting. That is a huge difference where the moisture is going to flow on our planet. And again, then they're trying to bend this to make it do different things as well, using ionospheric heaters and a couple other. They're trying to bend what's already bending in a natural cycle to make it move faster. And like I say, they keep piggybacking on every natural cycle that's occurring right now. So what they're expecting with this particular one, we're going to get into the blue here. We're going to bend south, and other areas are going to start drying out. Now, the jet streams are also another indicator that something's very wrong with the magnetic field on our planet, and this Grand Solar Minimum, it should be a U shape, and I'll come to this next one here. It should be something like this, is a U, and the media is already out there explaining to you, oh, the polar vortex, the jet streams can bring extreme cold because of global warming. So human-caused global warming is causing record cold. Okay. They already have a ready-made excuse, and you can see the jet streams should look like this. They should undulate in, a U shape or something like this. But in reality, they're north-south right now. And I thought that is extremely scary to look at a jet stream that's going north-south, which usually should have bends in it. And this was back in, I believe, February 23rd. And I just did a video on my channel the other day, and here we are, the jet streams are nearly vertical right now, and that was just a few days ago on May 14th. Or no, yeah, May 14th. That's the forecast right there. Oh, sorry, May 8th, that's what came out for that. So May 8th, the forecast came out, and this is what they expected on May 14th. So how did this go literally vertical? It changed from here, which was scary enough. It was sort of tilted, and there was no flow in it anymore. These are collapsing on each other, and this is why we're getting such massive mix-ups in our weather. And that's scary enough, but now they're nearly vertical, so what we're seeing in terms of cloud pattern on the planet is going to continue to change, and the more these go out of flow, food production is going to be unreliable. And it always comes back to the food. And if you can understand why this is happening, you can explain to other people what's going to happen with our food production. And here they come out. The reason I put this slide up here, somebody sent this to me. They're using the same headline, but all they're doing is changing the place. And I'll read it for you. Singapore is heating twice as fast as the rest of the world. Spain is warming faster than the rest of the Northern Hemisphere. Global warming is happening twice as fast in Alaska. Australia is heating twice as fast. Sweden's heating twice as fast. Adirondacks warming faster than global average. That's in America. Canada's warming twice as fast. Europe's warming twice as fast. The mountains are warming. Just mountains are warming twice as fast. Britain's warming twice as fast. China's twice as fast. South Africa's warming twice as fast. Russia's twice as fast. And Switzerland's twice as fast. So everywhere on the planet is twice as fast as itself, so the whole planet's warming twice as fast as the rest of the planet. And this is what they routinely do. So people read this and they go, oh my God, it's warming twice as fast. And when you start debating people in the global warming, and I'm not a denier, I actually believe our climate is shifting so fast that our societies won't be able to keep up with the changes. I'm an advocate. I believe so heavily that our climate is shifting and changing so fast. It is changing too fast. We're not going to be able to keep up with the changes to grow enough food. So, right now we're getting all these record snows and record cold, and the debate is all these record rains and cold and snow is caused by evaporation from the oceans, and this is driving all the record snow and the record rain. Okay, great. This is 1998 here. This is the highest El Nino ever recorded with heated oceans in both the Atlantic and the Pacific. Highest ever recorded for readings in terms of heat, especially across this area in the Central Pacific. 1998, so keep this on. And remember, when we look at this is the April temperatures from University of Alabama, Huntsville. It's only 0.44 above the averages from 1979. Now, I put the circles up here to let you know that the highest I got was just about 7.5 degrees, or 0.07, and here we are, it's just barely 1/10 of a degree warmer, but they're saying that all the record snow is caused by this 1/10 of a degree warmer. We should have seen record snow and record rainfall back at this time, too, if that excuse is valid. Because they say warming oceans causes all of this new precipitation and record snow. Okay, I'll buy it, maybe. If it was true, though, at that time we should have seen the same effects, which we haven't. We didn't. We only see it now because we're entering this grand solar minimum. And when they tell, it's running away, global warming, 0.44, sorry. And that's since 1979, so they have the baseline average there. Now we know through the history where the moisture is going to shift. This is over Indonesia and Australia. They've already done reconstructions back in the Little Ice Age, and they even went back into the 1400s and back to the year 1000, and they're just showing you how it shifted and how the sun's responsible with the intertropical convergence zone for the shifts in moisture north and south over Asia. And they know where the droughts have been because we see the droughts, and I want to bring you back right over here again. Let's take a look. 1790, where did we see that 1790 before with food price spikes? That first slide I showed you, remember it was up until 1800? Yeah, so we can see also there's a correlation. There was food disruption in growing in Europe, but there was also food disruption because of drought in Asia during the same years. So they're connected. You can get a proxy and you can figure out, okay, we know it's going to go into a drought again in this part of the world, and we know that there's going to be massive hailstorms and floods here across Europe that'll disrupt your growing. It'll get colder here too. So we can kind of just reconstruct around the planet again and again, and you just go through, it's going to get dry here, and you can forecast it out, basically. It's going to be very different this time, though. Now look at the record rains that are occurring in the Australian outback. This is the waterfalls off of Uluru, or otherwise known as Ayers Rock. That area is turning into fields out in the desert. And this is the northern outback, and as well as in the central outback, in the driest part of Australia, is now turning into a green field. This is unusual, and it's been like that. 2016 record rains, broken the next year by more rain, broken the next year by more, and now the highest rains ever recorded, 2019, that typhoon that blew through northern Queensland there 3 weeks ago. Also, California. Deborah, I'm going to bring you right into here. This was drought, and then a year later, look at the snowpack, no more drought. The problem is, all this extra water is going to create tinder and kindling for bigger fires this year. And you know what? They're going to say it's because of CO2 and you caused bigger fires. Actually, it's going to be more water growing more plants. Those plants are going to dry out, and then they're going to burn, and they're going to blame you for bigger fires because of CO2. On a natural cycle. That is a natural plant growth cycle. Take a look at the floods over in the USA. We lost an enormous amount of our stored wheat and corn this year. We lost about 30% of all grains stored in America got washed downstream during this event. Not really making the news too much. But look at the size of this. This is back in March 16th of 2019. This is what it normally looks like in the river systems through Missouri and Nebraska. But look how much it turned into an inland delta after the one flood event. Biggest floods ever recorded in American history, ever, hands down, never anything close. Our biggest river has been in the flood stage for the most days ever recorded, and we lost an enormous amount of the grain crop in the United States stored. I mean, all the bins were busting. We lost 30% at the minimum of all stored grain in America. This is what the fields currently look like. How long is it going to take to refurbish that before you can plant there again? Before you remove the debris? And forget the debris. What about all the pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, Roundup Ready, all that stuff that's in the soil that's going to damage or prevent new plant growth? What about the petrochemicals? What about the diesel? All that stuff's in the water, in the soils now, in our prime farm fields. We're not going to be able to grow. They're having a very difficult time even getting anything in the fields. This area, they're talking about 4 million acres going offline this year. They won't be able to plant due to flooding. 4 million acres. That's a lot for a wheat and corn grow belt. But you can see the rivers again, how much they swelled during these floods. I mean, that's a significant amount. And again, when you go around the world, you start to see these massive floods. Iran, all-time record, biggest floods ever recorded. Now here's where it gets real interesting. Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, etc., the Arab traders that used to trade on the Silk Road never talked about these big floods. They never experienced anything. So we're going back thousands of years in time where something has never been recorded in this region that's occurring right now. The Arab traders would have written extensively on that, mass floods, if they had occurred. It would have disrupted everything. But they didn't, and it's never been recorded at this level before the amount of floods. Some areas have dried out where there's now grass growing in some of these peripheral areas, and then the locust swarms are biblical. I mean, biblical. I encourage you to look up locust swarms across the Middle East right now. And then you start to look at the periphery countries too, like Afghanistan. Okay, here's the floods in the desert this river hadn't flowed in 2,000 years. And here we are, this is the flood. It's not a trickle. This is where we're going with the size of the floods across the planet. These cities were abandoned thousands of years ago because they ran out of water. And here we are, the water's coming back to the same settlements and temples and that we've seen in history. Now again, Afghanistan, Pakistan experiencing record floods, Iran, sure. But I want to draw your attention down here to Oman and Yemen, Saudi Arabia. If I say to you, Saudi Arabia, cold or warm or dry? Not really. It's a verdant field now from all the record rainfall. It's turning into a grassland across Saudi Arabia. Camels are in a year's worth of rain in Oman, and then 3 typhoons are now creating lakes in Yemen and Oman in some of the driest places in the world. Check, 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 check.
That's where the food's coming from.
That's where the food's going to come from in the future. They already know it. Atacama Desert, the driest desert in the world, 2nd year for the flower bloom up there. What's happening with the rainfall patterns globally? Now, this is the most interesting one, and it dovetails in with David's research earlier. Now, these X's are increased rainfall in different patterns thousands of years ago. This is where the Chinese investments are heavily. The map he showed me today with the integration of the militaries, they're going to try to control these areas. So the Chinese have been there for a decade and a half, but how did they know that these areas would become wetter? Well, they could have looked at the reconstructions, but how would they have known these patterns would start unfolding at the moment? So what I did is I kind of overlaid this in sort of a see-through format. So the last map that I showed you is this Chinese investment map. The area here with the crosses on it is where they're expecting now significant increases in rainfall. Now, how did they know that? How did they know that? And here we are. When we overlay on the map, you can start to see where the investments are overlaying on the rainfall patterns. Wherever you see a dot is where the Chinese are in there, right where these lakes are going to form. Why are they in the exact same spots where all the rain is going to start? All these heavier precipitation areas that will turn into lakes, why are the Chinese all along the riverbeds and everything right up in it? They know the cycle. If the food growing goes offline in China, they find a new food growing area, one that was previously just dust. They gave them thousands and thousands of miles of free land for the investment. And then I want to bring you up here too, because this is the most important thing. These are called the African megalakes in the mid-Holocene. About 6,000 to 7,000 years ago, they had these huge lakes, and it was very green across northern Africa, the Sahel desert now, but verdant grasslands. They were growing crops. They had an enormous amount of agriculture going on at that time with these huge lakes up there. Now, I tried to overlay this one, but it was just too busy. You couldn't really see anything inside there. But wherever you see the largest dots on here is where a major river flow through is expected to return to the area. So again, when you're seeing on this where a lake will form again, or we're going to get super heavy precipitation overlaid on the Chinese investment schemes, it's a little bit different than setting up where they know new rivers are going to form in when the rainfall starts. So they know where the drainage basins are going to go based on these historical cycles. Now, everybody's going to posture for this land right here. This is going to become some of the most verdant, productive agricultural croplands on the planet, hands down, in the future. This place is going to green, and they're going to become a new food grow zone. Well, what I saw this morning with David talking about, it looks like the EU is going to try to be in here vying for territory. China's already there. Are you going to scuffle with China to get food grow zones? That's what it looks like. I mean, when I look at it, that's the only possible explanation that they would want to get an integrated army like that. They're going to fight with China for this area here to grow food because When we look up here in Europe, well, we see losses everywhere. Here's the floods in Somalia. I mean, that's not normal water. That's replenishing the earth, refilling lake kind of water. Does this look strange to you? This is South Africa. Oh, and did I mention the desert southwest of the United States? Anything wrong with that picture? Yeah, that was the end of 2019, and then this is 2018 in December, and then this was 2019 in the desert southwest. Record snows, record rain down there. Why does the media not want to talk about these types of things? They keep saying, oh, global warming, it's going to get hotter. Now, I was here, and I was thinking, can I bring something local back to you? Yes, I can. There was the heat wave last year, right? And everything got dried out, and there was a mega drought and everything. Well, they started to see these different Bronze Age cemeteries that, you know, they wouldn't have seen it otherwise unless the huge drought had come. But think about that again. What's it say? Bronze Age. Does anybody remember that first chart? Bronze Age was when? Yeah, 3,500 years ago. So there's too many cycles matching up with this multi-millennia rainfall patterns and multi-millennia things being sighted again that haven't been seen in so long. And you're right, it's right about this time here. That is a long time ago for so many seemingly unrelated cycles to overlap. And again, we come back to the record snowfalls here in the northern hemisphere this year. Now this is the baseline average, and 2% or 2 standard deviations is within the blue. But we're way outside this. That was last year, 2017-18, and here we are this year again blasting across, you know, all-time record snow cover. I think it's 700 gigatons of new snow added on there, snow mass, yeah. 2 years in a row outside the averages so far out makes no sense unless we're getting in more cosmic rays with more clouds and cooler conditions to allow this much snowfall to fall. And here we are, this is my favorite one, Greenland, our poster child for global warming. This is 2015-16, the blue line, and the brown line is the standard that they'd measured everything off of. So when it was 2012 below average, they're like, it's melting, you gotta pay global tax. But when we 15-16, you can see it was above the averages. And then 16-17, wow, record gains. And then what, 2017 and 18, record gains again, and then this year, oops, offline. I'm serious. I encourage you to try to find the Danish or their DMI's ice feed to find these charts again. They don't exist. They took them offline. So what you have to do is go through the back door, and they don't have this kind of chart anymore, so you have to go to Polar Portal, but you can find surface conditions. Now what I mean by that is, I want you to notice this area here. The melt in 2012 and 13 brought us way down here into significant losses. But the melt just last year in 2017-18 never even crossed under that baseline. I thought it was melting into oblivion. Sea levels are going to rise. We're going to have to leave the coast. Well, I guess Greenland's not melting anymore. What would cause the reversal? A grand solar minimum, low solar activity, cooler conditions would cause that. And any astrologists out here in the audience, anybody know astrology? I know there has to be a few. What I want to show you here is planetary geometry from 79 AD. We have the Jovians, or the 4 gas giants, out here, and we have the Earth right in the center. 79 AD. You see that square configuration. Here's 2024. We have the same square configuration again with the Jovian gas giants. We have the square with the gas giants, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and then the Earth right in the center. It's a nearly identical match between 79 AD and 2024 coming up. I'm saying we're coming back into a 2,000-year cooling cycle at the minimum. A lot of people want to talk about Maunder minimum, but again, there's crisis in the danger, and this is called Weiji, and it means, the actual word in Chinese is Weiji, and it means they put the two characters together. Opportunity inside the danger. It means you need to find your niche out there. And this is what our global agriculture is going to turn into, and if we don't do anything about it, we already know where the changes are going to come. We know where the output declined in Bohemia, and we can map it out. Here's where the losses were for the vineyards over the last few years. And again, I put this out in 2017, and sure enough, this year, boom, 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 in those same places, based on historical cycles. We're going to lose crop growing area across Canada, parts of North America up in here. These areas are already going offline and will continue to. The areas in Australia for the wheat grow belts, mega drought down here. We're going to lose West Australia. Do you know how much grain that is and how much that's going to drive the food prices up globally? And again, I'll bring you back to China. They're scouring the planet for more food grow areas. All these areas I just showed you are going to go offline in terms of food grow, or be significantly reduced in the amount of crop production we're going to get out of this. Now, I made this chart myself here, and the lines are what they said in history, just historians following Chinese history at the date of the end of this particular emperor's reign. So I just drew the colored lines in there, and it's really interesting how they just fall right at the cusp of the cooling eras. We're in repeating cycles. Now, China's not going to go quietly into the night. They're going to do anything and everything they can to survive this time as the new emperor with Xi bringing on his new powers in China. They're going to do anything they can to try to buck history and be the first emperor that ever survived a grand solar minimum. Now, there are some options here. We can shift grow zones. So every 1 C degree drop, it's going to have to push about 100 miles further south. So if we're predicting something like the Maunder minimum would be 2.5 degrees Celsius drop, which means we have to move all of our growing of food 250 miles south. Well, you know what? A lot of people live there. We could switch crops. We could start growing hemp. This is what I'm doing at my own house. I'm starting vertical grow tubes, and this is on my balcony here, and I'm doing some of my own solutions, and I'm almost done. Another 2 minutes. I'm also in the process of building a magnetic motor. We're just using Earth's magnetic field to power a device that you can keep in your house. You could use gravitational vortex power. It's simply spinning water, and it drops right through here. It's a 1.5 foot drop. You can do it a little bit deeper drop, 3-4 feet, to get more of a spin in there. And there's ways to create power locally that we haven't really talked about too much. This is a new LED. It's an all-spectrum LED light that's come out. So what we're trying to do is bundle this system together with electric motor or electric capability producing using magnets to produce our own power in our own homes, coupled with the efficiency of this new all-in-one LED with vertical grow tubes. And that's kind of my solution that I'm working on, because I envision that we're going to have to bring most of our agriculture indoors. And Ted Marchildon up here at Omega Garden, he's working with the rotary design, and they're actually stacking them now so they move into a shipping container, and as long as you have the right ventilation and water and nutrient mix, you can continue to grow. So a lot of people working on the solutions out here. How are we going to pay for it? Maybe crypto, maybe not. But you see the rise of cryptocurrency occurring right at the rise of this grand solar minimum, so I really believe they're intertwined. And my last thing here is, The Economist magazine originally was just a black cover. They've since changed that. But they have the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So the black horse is the famine. And where does it center over? It centers over Europe right here. So why do they put the 4 horses of the... So since it was inverted, like when you try to read it, it's written backwards. So I thought, let me invert it and try to bring it together so you could see it as such. Now, this is one way to look at it, inverted. You can see it looks like a pyramid right in the middle of the marijuana leaf there, and then the pendulums turn into something else. And then I thought, all right, well, maybe that's not the correct up there. So I inverted it again, but I brought this into a 0, so it's a perfect inversion. But then this really changed in the center. What was the bulldog for the UK right here, which was this, suddenly turns into a little bit different. Perhaps you see something here. I see this, down here with the Mary Magdalene and a few other things. The Mary Magdalene, are they trying to tell us it's a 2,000-year cycle coming back again due to the birth of Christ? I mean, there's subliminal messages through here, and if you can decipher them, 4 horses of the apocalypse, famine, the black horse. We got at least a 2,000-year cycle deciphered in this thing. I don't know, up to you. I really have no idea, but we're all part of the solution. The solutions are going to come from everybody this time. Young generation, mid-generation, older people. We all need to start thinking about it because we're all in it together, and that's the reason I do my channel and the reason I bring you this information, because I am here with you. And if everybody here is prepared, we're going to get along way better than if I'm the only guy prepared. We're going to have to help each other. We truly are, and that's the only way forward is to help each other get through this, and I thank you so much. My name is David DuByne, oilseedcrop.org. Would you like that?
Outstanding.
Great, no, thank you.